You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast, where investing is made simple. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. We have a big challenge in our world in terms of data collection, privacy, both as consumers, but also as entrepreneurs. The control of information and how we use information and transfer information. It's a big part of anyone wanting to go into business. And so today we've got a very special guest. We have Carissa Veliz. First of all, thank you for joining us, Carissa. Fantastic to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And tell me, where are you? I feel like you're in London. Is that right?
I'm in Oxford.
Oxford. Okay, wonderful. And we'll have you give you a little bit of your background. You're an associate professor, and the book you've written is called Privacy is Power. Why and how you should take back control of your data. It's available on Amazon.com, so we'll talk a little bit about why you wrote this book. But first of all, give us just a little bit of your background and what led you to become interested in what you do today.
I'm an associate professor at the University of Oxford, and I studied philosophy. And one of the things that got me interested in privacy was quite a personal matter. I started researching the history of my family, and in the archives, I discovered many things that they hadn't told us. So I started wondering about whether I had a right to know these things that my grandparents hadn't told my parents or me. And being a philosopher, I sought to philosophy to answer some questions, and I found the answers there quite unsatisfying. And I realized there wasn't much written in philosophy about privacy. And a few months later, Edward Snowden revealed that we were being surveilled at a mass scale, and that really impacted me. And it just seemed to me that there was a literature gap there that was very important in philosophy, and that there was nothing about the ethics of privacy, particularly in relation to the digital age.
This is such an important part of the information age now, and with technology, data is so valuable in commerce, in defense. You know, when we look at China and their lack of privacy. And so we're going to have a great conversation because this deals with people. It's a global idea for sure. So let's start here. If I were to use the term data economy, what is the data economy?
So if we're very technical, the data economy is just buying and selling data. Though many times in common usage, people refer to the data economy as the commodification of personal data in particular. So buying and selling personal data.
And, you know, when we had Google, you know, you think, how does Google replace Yahoo, right? I mean, you go to Yahoo and it's a search engine and you type something in and get a result. And turns out we weren't Googling them. Google was Googling us, right? And the ability to track a person's habits, the ability to see what they look at, how often they look at it, when they look at it, it's really eerie about how valuable that can be in terms of matching customers with services. So if it helps us, I'll play the devil's advocate, if it helps me get better services and timely stuff, and I get ads that are targeted for what I'm looking for, well, what's not to like about letting people monitor me? What's not to like about that?
That's a really good point. And there are at least two answers. One is that you could get all those advantages without being monitored. So say you're looking for shoes online or for a nice suit, and you search for that on your search engine. The search engine only needs to know that to target ads to you. They don't need to know who you are, your sexual preferences, your political tendencies, whether you're married or not, whether you have children or not, your credit history. They only need to know that you're looking for shoes. So we can get the advantages without the disadvantages. And why don't you want to be monitored? Because it's incredibly risky, and because that data is often used against you. It's used to deny you opportunities. It's used to treat you on the basis of your data, as opposed to treating us like equal citizens.
So let's go right to the heart of that, because it's something I'm interested in. I'm excited to speak to someone who's researched it, and it's very easy to become conspiratorial and paranoid, but I'll tell you, I have some very real fears. So Let's say that I live in China, and I don't know the things I've heard, whether they're rumor, whether they're true. But China, they do not protect their citizens' privacy in the way other countries might. And in the race for AI, artificial intelligence is improved by the amount of data that you can feed the machine. So here we have a country with a very large population with almost no property rights. And I've heard that they'll even monitor, for example, let's say someone is charging their cell phone regularly and the other person doesn't charge it. Based on cell phone habits, that can be part of an algorithm to decide whether you're credit worthy or not based on all these different things AI knows about you. I've heard that they are even starting to say, these people are more likely to commit a crime than other people. So when you take the data of what we do and we add it to AI, all of a sudden machines start to use predictive algorithms to judge us on things we may or may not have done yet. Am I paranoid? Am I up in the night? Or is that a real fear that I should be concerned about?
I think we should be concerned about it. And yes, in China, there is very little privacy and people's data is used for all kinds of things. It's a kind of global social credit score that tries to score people as to whether they're trustworthy or not. And one of the problems with it is that it's very totalitarian in the sense that you get scored for something, and if you get a bad point, that affects the whole of your life. So for instance, say you play video games online and you cheat in a video game. That can have consequences for whether you can apply for a loan or an apartment, or whether you can even travel on train. So your whole life gets affected by that. Now, there's an argument there that you were, I think, starting to refer to about how if we protect privacy, then other countries like China will have more data, and so their AI is going to be better, right?
Yeah, that's what some people say.
And this is a very misleading argument for many reasons. One thing to take into account is that personal data tends to be quite inaccurate for many reasons, partly because it's hard to collect it quickly enough and to make sure it's accurate, but also because it becomes old quite quickly. So maybe, a year ago, you liked things on Facebook that you don't like anymore, but you never went back and click unlike. So there's a lot that's inaccurate about you as soon as personal data becomes a bit old. And secondly, when we talk about AI and when we talk about these great advancements in AI, what we're wanting to design is exactly that, intelligence, artificial intelligence. And if you've ever spent time with a child, you can tell how intelligent they are and how quickly they learn. So you only have to teach a child something once or twice and they pick it up immediately and they can generalize to new situations, whereas your digital assistant is quite dumb if you compare it. And there is an argument to be made that these algorithms are still very bad, and no matter how much data we throw at them, it's not going to make them better. The real advancements in AI will come from better designs of algorithms, and in the future, AI will not need as much data as it needs now.
These are really interesting times. I never imagined, I'm an old man now, and I never imagined growing up that I'd be having a conversation like this. It's moving so quickly and so fast. So let's divide this in two ideas. We have governments that would like to see what we're doing, and we have big tech. How much information does big tech get? And how are my decisions every day impacted by big tech? Are they influencing me maybe more than I think?
Probably. They get a lot of information. They know when you wake up, with whom did you sleep, where you live, where you work, whether you drive, what your car is, whether you drive well or not, what you eat, how much you drink. They even know how much you weigh. They know everything about you and more. They know more about you than you probably know, and certainly more than your spouse and your family and friends know about you. And it's impacting you in all kinds of very opaque ways, partly because this data gets shared and gets sloshed around, gets aggregated with other data, and as you mentioned, it gets used by predictive analytics. So, for instance, when you apply to insurance, a company could well be trying to infer your life expectancy from how quickly you walk or from how you slide your finger on your phone. And it's not clear that, these algorithms are accurate, and yet they're judging you and making very important decisions about your life on the basis of this data.
It's incredible. My wife went to the local mall to get my son a pair of basketball shoes. And she just, she was looking for shoes. And I don't know that, I know there's geofencing that goes on and people will look at your cell phone. I've had advertisers approach me, say, Andy, we can target this and that and the other. Says, I don't want to fool with that. We've never done that because it hasn't felt right to me. It just feels like it's over the line. But my wife's looking at shoes for my son. Next thing you know, her Facebook ads are all tennis shoes. Just boom, 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 boom. All her email, tennis shoes. And it's almost as if someone can watch what you're doing. Now, maybe it's a coincidence, but that type of stuff seems to happen, and it's probably not a coincidence. They know where we're going and what we're looking at, and what we're searching for online all the time, right?
Yeah, that's probably not a coincidence. And if you look at the categories that these ad companies use, they're really creepy. So they include categories like people who have been victim of rape, people who are HIV positive, people who have lost their kids in an accident. They're really exploiting very, very sensitive information about us.
What a powerful book. The book is Privacy is Power, Why and How, which is two very important things. Why we should take back control, but also how to do it. How you should take back control of your data. So we've talked about some of the issues. Let's talk about what can be done in two ways. When I see a problem, whether it's a financial problem or whatever, you have two levels. You have systemic solutions, which usually involve regulations and government, and then you have individual solutions that a person can do if they view themselves of having their own responsibility. I tend to lean towards individual responsibility because I don't always trust government to be very powerful, quick, or efficient with systemic issues. But let's talk about both of them. What do you see happening now and in the future concerning, to what degree do you regulate or can you regulate a Google, and how do you even audit that type of idea? In the stock market, we can audit books and see where money went and get an accounting of cash, but to get an accounting of data, that's a level of accounting that is far more complex than simply dollars. So I'd really like to know your opinions. I'm sure you touch more in the book that people can read, but let's talk about your opinions on how do we deal with this globally or at least systemically with governments.
We do need regulation, and I think we will regulate these companies. We have regulated all past industries, from railroad to food companies to pharmaceuticals, cars, airplanes, you name it. So it would be very strange not to regulate these huge companies that are having such a big effect in society and in democracy as such. But we do need people to take care of their privacy, partly so that they create pressure, both on companies and governments, for institutions to change their ways. It's an expressive mode. It's crucially important. In terms of regulation, it is hard to police data. But if you think about it, what is money today? It's
data.
Nothing but data.
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. So if we can do that, surely we can police other kinds of data. Money is just one kind of data. And I propose many measures. I actually call for the end of the data economy, and this is the first book to do so. And one of the things we should implement, I argue, are fiduciary duties between people who manage and collect data and data subjects. Fiduciary duties are professional duties that are implemented. Exactly, like an accountant.
Attorney. Or an attorney, you bet.
Or a doctor.
Yep.
When there's an asymmetry of power, you need to make sure that the interests of the vulnerable person are protected first and foremost. So if anybody wants to deal with your data, they have to take on the responsibility to use that data only in your favor and never against you.
It's very, very powerful. What can people do as individuals? I know, when there's online, there's tools like, VPNs. I don't know to the degree that stuff really works. Masked emails. I still want to be who I am. I still want to be Andy. There's a part of me that says, look, I'm not murdering anybody. They can follow where I go. If they want to follow my data on my cell phone, it's going to be pretty boring. but at the other side of me is alarmed. So what can I do as an individual? We have a systemic idea of regulation and accounting and fiduciary responsibilities. What can a listener, someone listening right now, besides starting with your book, what can they do to manage their data better and to keep their privacy intact?
There are lots of things we can do. And even if you think you have nothing to hide, it's like you still shut your front door, right? Because other people might want to steal your money. It's the same thing. It's not about having something to hide. It's about protecting yourself. So basically, we have to start looking for opportunities to exercise our control over our data. One thing is to be respectful of other people's privacy, because privacy is actually not a personal thing. It's a collective thing. It's a misunderstanding to think it's an individual thing. So don't take pictures of others and upload them. Ask for consent for these kinds of things. If you receive a message exposing somebody, don't forward it, don't share it. So let's create a culture in which we protect each other.
I want to hit that point, not to interrupt you, but what you said, I believe, is powerful, is policy and culture might overlap a little bit, but how do you legislate goodness? How do you legislate love for one another? How do you legislate those types of emotions about how we feel about another race? A culture is more powerful than a policy, because policy forces people to do things. Culture tends to help us say, hey, this is an identity. This is who we are. This is how we want to be as human beings, not because we have to, but because we want to. So I appreciate the idea of a culture of respect, of privacy, as much as I would policies and legislation. That's a huge thing. So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought that was
really good point.
I thought that was such a good point you made. I wanted to emphasize that and highlight that. How's COVID played into this? What have we learned from COVID about privacy?
Yeah, COVID has been a real challenge, and it's still a challenge. On the one hand, we want to protect ourselves, but on the other hand, it's not clear how much we have to surrender our privacy to protect ourselves. So, many people cite China as an example of a success case of getting the virus under control. And they argue that it's because they were authoritarian and because they had this very intrusive app, when in fact, what I think was doing the heavy lifting there was massive testing, testing the whole population and not actually tracking people on their phones. So there's a lot of controversy there, and we should be alert, and we shouldn't just give up our data without reflecting on it and without thinking through whether it's actually necessary. So easy things that people can do just in general is, instead of using Google search, use DuckDuckGo. It doesn't track you, and it's almost as good. Partly, it takes a bit to get used to just seeing a different font, but it really works well, and it's working every day better because more people are using it. Instead of using WhatsApp that's owned by Facebook, use Signal. Instead of using Gmail, use ProtonMail. There are many services that are alternative, that are just as easy to use. They're free, and that will respect your privacy.
And you bring up a great point for capitalism, because as people become more aware of what the giants of Facebook, Google, Twitter, probably the big three, Amazon, stuff like that, okay, that leaves room for someone who says, you know what, we don't do this stuff. And they can compete and draw customers away from this. This has a lot to do with free speech, too. If Facebook begins to censor you, I've never been censored, but I've had friends that have shared an article that is a point of view, not necessarily fake news or real news, just a point of view. And boy, they get tagged for, spreading misinformation. So the idea that in a capitalism world, well, great, let's watch for these companies that want to compete on the basis of, well, here's an advantage. We're not going to mess with your data the way these guys will. Problem is, it's so unseen that it's hard to trust or know, if people actually do what they say they're going to do, correct? It's tough because it's hidden.
That is correct. It's tough. So it's easier to know who is not doing the right thing. First, because there are companies that have had so many scandals that they've just proven time after another that they don't care at all about our privacy. But secondly, we have to look at the business model. So you have to ask yourself, how does this company make money? And if they make money through personal data, then you know that your privacy is not going to be protected.
It's just a fascinating discussion. It's so powerful. As entrepreneurs, what is our responsibilities? I mean, you talk about big tech. What about smaller companies? What are their responsibilities to keep data secure in terms of what they should keep, what they should track, what they shouldn't?
The responsibility is to keep data safe. And if you don't have the capabilities, because in fact it's very hard to keep data safe, then don't collect data. Because above and beyond morality and it being the right thing to do, it's also a liability. Every data point is a potential data breach, a potential lawsuit, and you don't want to be in that position. You are creating your biggest risk. So by not collecting personal data, you're actually saving yourself a lot of trouble of how to manage it and how to keep it safe.
Do you see this being a big battle, or do you see this as being something that will happen? Should people feel like, boy, we're going to have to really be, activists towards this? Is there a big fight, obviously, from big tech to be harnessed? What is the trend, I guess, that you see? Is this a problem that's getting worse or a problem that's getting better?
I think it's a problem that's getting better, but there is a need for activism because the faster we do it, the less risk we will incur. So what I fear is that this is going to get done sooner or later because it's unsustainable and because it's too dangerous even for national security. So at the moment, because internet is so insecure, and it is insecure because we make it so that we can collect personal data, hackers, say from Russia, would only need to hack 10% of our appliances, turn them on at the same time, and then bring down the national grid. It's really dangerous. So I think it's going to happen sooner or later. But if we don't do it fast enough, democracy can get eroded, our equality can get eroded. We can suffer very grave harms, including something like genocide. Just imagine like a contemporary Nazi regime having all the data that we have, real-time location data, facial print, digital print. It would be super, super dangerous. So what I hope is that we can regulate before it's too late.
It will be interesting to see how China deals with this because, the people, I can't imagine living, you'd feel like you were surveilled at all times. You would feel a nervousness of making a human mistake. You would feel measured against your neighbor in every way. And the stress levels of what that does to a person's physiology year in, year out, that cannot be healthy for a human being. Even if they're an innocent person not wanting to commit a crime or anything, just a mistake of not charging your cell phone the right way and the stress of being constantly monitored, that can't be good for a person's health.
Yes, I think we're not made to be observed all the time. I think it comes from a very old evolutionary history that whoever is observing us, usually it's because we are prey to them, right? So it makes us really nervous.
Yeah, it's like having a lion watch you all the time. Well,
exactly.
You are just so gracious to be on the podcast. Again, go to Amazon.com. What a wonderful book. Privacy is Power. Why and how you should take back control of your data. This is a basic training, in my opinion. When I grew, I'm an overgrown Boy Scout, and we had merit badges. And what the merit badges were is there were certain that were required. Life-saving merit badges, how to swim, first aid, citizenship in the community, citizenship in the nation, citizenship in the world. There were just these fundamental lessons that weren't often taught well in school that you can learn. I think in the world we live in, a book like Privacy is Power, Why and How You Should Take Back Control of Your Data is definitely a staple of your personal education library, your business education library, and also as a consumer. So I cannot thank you enough, Carissa. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you for putting in the work for us to give us such a great book to move forward and have a little bit of instruction as we try to navigate this world that's changing so fast. Final thoughts as we come to the end of the podcast. What would you say to listeners as a parting message?
It might seem radical to call for the end of the data economy, but that's only because the status quo is so bizarre, and it's something that we wouldn't have ever accepted if we had been proposed upfront. So what is radical is to have an economic system and a business model that depends on the mass and systematic violation of rights.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. Again, I thank you so much. You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.